Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the reference recording for Bruckner's Eighth Symphony. Yes, Bruckner's biggest, most apocalyptic, that's its nickname. No one knows who gave it that nickname, and it didn't have a nickname until about the past few years when Bruckner started to become more popular, and it needed one, so someone invented it. So anyway, but it's his biggest symphony, his grandest symphony, one of the most sublime creations in the history of Western orchestral thought, I guess. And the reference recording, I'm going to tell you right now, some of you may find this controversial, but it is unquestionably the reference, and I'm going to tell you why. Is Karajan Berlin. This is the Karajan Berlin Symphony box, and this is his analog Berlin Phil recording. Now, Karajan did Bruckner 8 three times. First, there was one for EMI with Berlin from like the late 50s or early 60s or something like that. Then there was this valedictory one with the Vienna Phil, which he took on tour and which I saw at Carnegie Hall, and it was one of the greatest things I ever heard in my life. And this may be the better performance, maybe. Some people may think it is. It is glorious performance, and Karajan himself was dazzled by it. He was like, whoa, I can't believe we did that, supposedly, after the concert. It was astonishing. One of his very last concerts. And so, that's a wonderful tribute to his stature as a Bruckner conductor. However, the reference recording is not that, and it's not the one I like the best, which is none of these. It is the one in this box, this one, the one that had the bird wing with the snow. As a friend of mine once said, it looked like roadkill. It looked like some animal had run into your car windshield and left the imprint of its wing there before it got. Anyway, so remember the wings? That was it. And that's the Bruckner Eighth. I can give you the date. Maybe if I can find it in here. Hang on. Let me see if I can dig it out, and they'll tell me. I'm sure they will. Here we are, Bruckner Symphonies 1 and 9. It's on page 9 here. And of course, they don't ever give you the dates with the track listings. The dates are all in this absolutely ridiculous thing, little tiny thing at the end of the booklet. So it's Beethoven, Brahms, Bruckner. Here we go. Numbers 1 through 3. No, we don't want that. We want number 8. There it is, number 8. It was 1975. So there you go. From January and February, March, April 1975, number 8. Okay. The 1975 Bruckner 8. Now, why is that? Well, here's the bottom line. Way back in the day, in the 1970s, Bruckner was never popular until recently. He's still not popular. Who are we kidding? He doesn't sell. He probably never will. Bruckner people are louder and more vociferous than they were, and Bruckner scholarship has become an entire academic specialty all by itself, which has generated interest by generating score after score after score of different versions of the same symphonies. It's all ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, but it's created a lot of talk. And so Bruckner is better known than he used to be. He's also popular among young conductors who are looking for something in the German standard repertoire that hadn't been done a billion times already, like Beethoven and Brahms. I mean, it's not that much. Schumann, Mendelssohn, Schumann and Mendelssohn are nice, but they're not big. Mahler, everybody's doing, and he's not really German because he was Jewish and from the Czech lands. So, what do you got? That leaves Bruckner. Bruckner is a wonderful composer, I've said before, for young conductors who really don't understand sonata form. He really is. He's perfect for them. Which is most of them. So they're all doing Bruckner. And so there's just tons of Bruckner everywhere now, but that wasn't the case. Back in the 70s, when Karajan was doing Bruckner, there was, Karajan doing Bruckner. Sure, Haydn had done Bruckner on Philips, but he wasn't known the way Karajan was known. And Philips, even as a label, before it became part of Universal and all of that stuff, was an import label of the Concertgebouw, not having the cachet as the German orchestra that the Berlin Philharmonic did. And then you had Eugen Joachim. Now, Joachim's DG recordings were available with the Berlin Phil partly and with Bavarian Radio, but Karajan was doing Bruckner. So the Joachim recordings weren't promoted at all by Deutsche Grammophon. They existed. People knew them in Germany. He had a following in Germany, but nowhere else in the world. And when he started redoing his remakes with the Staatskapelle Dresden on EMI, those were also not promoted to any degree. And the Eighth was unfortunately not as well recorded as the others. It didn't sound very good. There was something not right about it. I mean, Joachim never quite had the measure of the Eighth, actually, I think, in any of his performances. And so it wasn't the most recommendable. And what that meant, I mean, there were some Decca recordings with Vienna, I mean, with different conductors. Zubin Mehta had done the Eighth, but nobody was going to take him seriously as a Bruckner guy. They should have, mind you, but they weren't. Karajan was the guy doing Bruckner. For most of us who were record collectors at that time, he was the only guy doing Bruckner. And this was his major recording of the Eighth, because the earlier one for EMI was out of print for it was in print for 10 minutes, let's put it that way. I mean, I didn't even know that he had done an earlier Eighth until those editions started showing up, which did all the work that he did for EMI earlier, all of his earlier work, I mean, because it wasn't available. So this was the Bruckner Eighth that we all heard, that we all learned the work from. And Karajan's Bruckner was, it was a very mixed bag, very inconsistent, because in spite of what people say, that Bruckner wrote the same symphony 9 times and all that bullshit, the fact is they're very different works, and they admit of very different approaches. Karajan never quite got the Sixth right. His performance of the Sixth is even sloppy in places. His Fifth, horrible chorale at the end that just congeals. Ugh. But the Eighth was a piece he could do. And he did do. And he did it fabulously. And he did it fabulously in his Karajan-esque spiritual mode. In other words, he closed his eyes and he gave a downbeat, and he was absolutely steady in tempo throughout an entire movement. Dynamics were terraced, pianissimo, fortissimo, pianissimo with a huge dynamic range. All of this is what's in the score, by the way. He took Bruckner very, very literally. Most conductors of Bruckner, and Joachim particularly and others, did a lot of fiddling with tempos and transitions to try and make it sound more sonata form traditional and having a goal-directed sense of tension and release and climax and all of that stuff. Karajan didn't do that. Karajan was Bruckner, the Zen spiritual Bruckner. These huge blocks of sonority were just that. He made no effort to try and knit everything together or ease over the transitions. The huge climaxes ended at nothing, and they ended at nothing. It was really very impressive in the Eighth, particularly because it's such a massive work, and because it has, this truly spacey, you can call it transcendental quality to it. It really does. Not all of Bruckner is like that, mind you, but the Eighth really is, and so it really it responded very well to Karajan's approach, and it was an incredibly powerful performance. I remember buying the records vividly, thinking, wow, because I'd heard others. It wasn't the first experience I had of Bruckner's Eighth, but I will say it was the first transcendental experience I had of Bruckner's Eighth, for sure. So I could understand why this was the reference recording, which is why I bought it. As I keep saying to you folks, this isn't just my opinion of what a reference recording was. I got these because they were the references before I had an opinion. I mean, that was me understanding what the reference was because I was paying attention, not because I'm just picking something. And a lot of you will have performances of Bruckner's Eighth that you prefer, because now, after Karajan's, we had Giulini, which is stunning, 10 or 12 dozen from Günter Wand, all of which are marvelous. Ottmar Sweetener, which I think is my favorite of all of them on Berlin Classics. We talked about that in a previous video. There were many, many fine performances. The Mazel Berlin, which is incredible, fabulous, I think better than Karajan's. So, we all have our choices. for Bruckner's Eighth now. But back then, there were very many fewer choices, number one. And number two, the fact that Karajan was doing Bruckner and was actually sort of welcoming him into the stable of the German classics, if you call it that. I mean, that was a big deal. It was a big deal then, and this Eighth is still a big deal. It's a very impressive and powerful performance of its type. But it makes a great reference. It really does. And it still does. And after that, you can get this one. I mean, if you can only have one, I'd get this one, the Vienna one. But really a first-class performance and a wonderful, reliable reference version. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.